Colby, hey, thanks for joining me. We've got Colby Griner on the podcast today. Colby, I'd love for you to just, I don't know, tell people who you are, what you do, and um, why you do it.
Yeah, I'm the broadcast production technician at Compassion Christian in Savannah. I just recently started there. I've been there just for a couple weeks. Prior to that, I was the production director at a smaller church in Brunswick, Georgia, First Baptist Church there. I've been there for about 3 years and then just recently changed jobs at Compassion. So that's kind of where I got my start in production. But yeah.
Yeah. So you started in production at First Brunswick, like first ever.
Yeah, prior to that, I had no experience. I was like in high school, like my junior, senior year. And that's kind of where I got, interested in production as a whole. I had no prior experience or anything. So really just kind of took over that team. They didn't have anybody specifically leading that department. So I've kind of just learned more skills, like dabbled in each little different department of that and kind of just grew from there. And then from there, I ended up deciding to change my majors in college because of that. So I changed my major from aviation to film and production. So I got two more classes and then I graduate. So I'm excited about that as well.
That is exciting. That's awesome. And
Yeah.
you just said Georgia Southern, right? You go to
Yeah,
Georgia Southern.
I
That's
got a
awesome.
Georgia Southern. Yep.
That's awesome. Well, and I know from your TikTok, which we'll talk about for sure, you're doing like production work for the sports teams and stuff over at Georgia Southern. Yeah,
That's right.
ESPN.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. I've kind of got involved with that. They have a department under their athletic department. It's called GATA Productions. And they do all of the ESPN plus broadcasts for the school. So kind of I've learned a lot. And it's just been really fun, kind of very different from the church world as far as the sports industry. So it's been fun learning that, and you can definitely apply principles from the sports world and bring that into the church world as well, and vice versa.
What kind of things have you brought into New Brunswick or you're going to at Compassion?
Probably the biggest thing is just the way everything operates. And it's very similar that Compassion since it's a little bit higher in production. But going back to my days at First Baptist Brunswick, just the way, over comms, communication, stuff like that. It's very industry standard, terminology and the ways you communicate and achieve different goals and stuff. So just kind of taking that in more of like professional manner into the church world.
Oh, that's awesome. No, I love that. Um, I know do you particularly lean in one way or the other, audio, video, lighting, or do you like it all? Do you want to learn it all? What's your leaning there?
I'm kind of interested in all of it. However, I started in the lights area, so I that's where I really started, learning how to program lights and learned a lot about music as far as energy and all of that. So I started in lights, kind of dabbled in graphics, ProPresenter, stuff like that. And then mostly what I do now is in the video world. I know enough to be
Yeah.
dangerous in audio, but I don't enjoy audio. I let the people that are really good at audio take care of that.
That's cool. Yeah, lighting is a fun one. I really enjoy that.
Yeah.
What were you guys on Vista at New Brunswick? Or
Yeah.
guys?
Yeah. Both churches, they both run Vista. So I've never actually, messed around with like Granite May or anything. I know that's kind of industry standard at larger places. So I'm definitely interested in learning Granite May. Just haven't had like the opportunity to get my hands on one.
Yeah, no, that's great. Vista I feel like is I'm sort of torn because I feel like it is a good platform for smaller churches. Um, but there's been some developments and they're not really doing as much as they used to.
Right.
I don't know. That's really cool. So before we started recording, you were talking about being the online broadcast. Um, I'm sorry. Say your title again.
It's
Or
broadcast production technician. So
broadcast production technician. Okay,
yeah.
so um, you guys are coming up, Compassion's coming up with a new series at the movies, which I'm sure churches around the nation do that periodically through the year. But you were saying that you had to create a separate online experience because you can't show the clips in online.
Right, because of copyright issues, they're basically at the movies is where they take movies that are popular, out of Hollywood. For instance, like I think one of the movies they're doing is Top Gun Maverick. They can't show that. You can't stream that legally, right? Online. So they had to create a custom online service. That way we could air that online and then in the room and all the local campuses can do at the movies. So that was started before I got hired there and joined the team there. So I'm kind of just on the finishing end, programming that, scheduling that to post and stuff like
I
that.
gotcha.
So,
So what
yeah.
kind of things are you doing online? Like what did that look like? Did you record like the pastor come in and record a completely different sermon and the worship band are they doing something different? Are you I'm just curious like what that looks like? Are you taking parts of the live worship and then cutting in the message, or is it just completely like we're just going to push play on Sunday morning?
Right. So the online service is very similar to what normal people watching a Sunday morning online would look like. So it's not very different. So it's basically the worship band on the stage. The only difference is we didn't show as many wide shots just because the room was empty when it was recorded.
Oh, true. Yeah.
So that's one different, and then one difference, and then it cuts into the studio with an online host, and then the sermon the pastor filmed in the studio as well. So that's kind of the only difference. The If you were watching though, you probably wouldn't realize that it was a special service just online if you didn't know about it. So
Yeah, that's good. That's awesome. That's really cool. I know like that kind of flexibility, churches have been doing more of that kind of stuff since like the pandemic, all the churches online and it's like, hey, not everything has to be live. We can pre-record stuff. I know we do that, you know, we don't really pre-record music anymore because that's a much bigger than just one person coming and speaking from stage.
right.
But every now and then we'll have a pre-record of the message for the Sunday. And yeah, I mean, you'd have to know that it was pre-recorded. Otherwise, yeah, it's awesome. That's really cool. Yeah, so I'd love to talk to you and your former boss, Josh. He mentioned that it might be fun to talk about like your experiences before coming on staff at New Brunswick, and not specifically in New Brunswick, but just church, like being a volunteer and then coming on staff at a church. What was that like? Because you came on staff like in the middle of college, yeah.
I was still in high school,
You were still in
so
high school when you were on staff.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
nice. Okay.
So I was I think a junior or so. And at the time they had somebody that worked part-time production. I mean, the church runs like 650 people a Sunday. So it's not small by any means, but it's also not extremely large church or anything. So they had a part-time production person there. And that person really just did audio. They didn't really handle any videos or anything like that. So they kind of led that department. And then when I that's when I kind of started volunteering and learning different areas, started with lights and ProPresenter and stuff like that. When COVID hit and we weren't allowed to have in-person services, we obviously had to shift. And so that's where the leadership there decided, okay, like everybody else, we've got to do online services. That's the only way we can continue. So that's kind of when I got hired on. I started there. So basically I was producing all of the online services, editing everything. We would pre-record worship and the sermon and all of that, which was a really big task for one person. So I stayed really busy during COVID and trying to handle all that. So yeah, I started started volunteering there when I was at the end of my years in high school. And then my original plan was when I go to college that I was going to just, leave and they were going to hire somebody or figure it out. And the senior pastor there somehow convinced me to stay. So two years later, I was still there. And like I said, I recently just changed to Compassion. I feel like God was leading me there. But since then, I was driving back and forth every weekend. So I was working remote during the week. I could remote into computers and stuff and program per presenter and make videos and stuff. And then I would drive the 2 hours back to do the service on Sunday morning, and then leave Sunday night and do it again. So I did that for about 3 years.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah,
That's some dedication. That
yeah,
is,
it
yeah,
was
that's dedication right there.
kind of crazy when I think about how I did that for 3 years. I don't know.
Yeah. So did you move up to Savannah now that you're at Compassion, or are you
I'm
still now are you just going north instead of south from
basically, yeah, I still live in Brunswick. However, I'm looking at houses and stuff and trying to figure that out in Savannah
Okay.
right now. So yeah,
Wait,
so my
how far is Brunswick from Savannah?
so the church from my house in Brunswick is an hour, so without traffic. So it's not terrible, but not fun to do that every day.
No, no, yeah. I
So
used to, well, my commute was only because of traffic, but yeah, I used to have about an hour and 15 over to work. So yeah,
yeah,
not fun. Not fun at
no,
all.
nope.
Dang.
So I'm looking at houses, in fact, this weekend and stuff. So hopefully move there pretty soon and cut my commute just a couple minutes.
That's yeah, probably just a couple.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So yeah, so I know that one of the things I started seeing first Brunswick start popping up on TikTok, and you are the culprit of that. And you have a really big following on TikTok, and I would love to talk about what was the what was the idea behind, or were you just like having fun and you're like, oh shoot, people are starting to watch this, well, I'll continue, or were you like, this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to show people, or so yeah, I'd just love to hear what you said, or hear why and why you stuck with it.
Yeah, this was I think maybe like close to 3 years. That's what kind of when I right after COVID. So I just posted like I think it was like a day in the life of a church production director, and it was like Easter Sunday. So I just filmed it. I thought it'd be fun to look back, and I posted it, and it got like a couple 100,000 views. I was like, I was not expecting that. And I was like, maybe this is just like a coincidence. I don't know. So and I think I gained like maybe like 7 or 8 thousand followers just from that one video.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, maybe this is just a coincidence, maybe not. So I kept making videos related to production, specifically like church production, and people just kept watching them. I don't know why. I don't know if they were entertaining or if I don't know people were learning something from them. So I just kept making videos related to production,
Uh-huh.
and people just kept following and liking the videos and stuff. So here I am, like 3 years later.
Yeah. Yeah. You have like 20,000 followers or something like that on
I think
TikTok.
so. Yeah, I think the last time I checked was like 23,000. So
That's
yeah,
that's insane, which is super cool. And I think one of the things, like, you were very consistent in posting, and yeah, and they were fun. I mean, they weren't serious. I mean, they were serious, but they weren't like, I'm going to tell you about church production and this is the way you need to do
right,
it.
right,
It was like just fun. We're having fun. We're not taking ourselves too serious, and I think that's resonated with people. And I also think it probably had to do with, like, you were at a smaller church, and so, which is the majority of people go to smaller churches.
right.
And so there's a lot more people looking for that content than people posting, North Point or Passion or stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. And I could definitely relate to that. I think that was a big factor because when I would look at other churches in, for instance, North Point, obviously they have far more resources than a small 600-person church that I was at. So I think to some degree it was relatable to my followers that I had, and realized that you don't have to have a massive budget or massive church or even like great resources to produce decent quality, a decent online service. So I think that was definitely a factor. And then I think people are just, learning new ways to do stuff. I look back on like just 3 years ago, and I watched like an online service and want to cringe. So please don't go back and watch those. But just look back how far, grown over just the past couple of years. And I'm not, I'm posting my videos, but I've learned so much from TikTok and YouTube and just figure out how other people are doing stuff. And then I can take that back to my own church to grow from that.
Yeah, like what kind of stuff have you taken back from TikTok and YouTube?
Probably, I don't know, just seeing like mainly the gear that people are using and how they've got it configured, what type of video switchers everybody's using. And obviously like when you look at gear as far as production, there's hundreds of thousands of options you can go with and so many different name brands. And so just kind of seeing what people are using, how are they using it, and then also like you can just see what's cost effective based on the budget you've got to work with. So kind of just seeing what other people are using and then take that and doing more research.
No, that's cool. Cause like you can see someone do this amazing rig and you might be like, oh, well, I might be able to adapt it to something that I could afford.
Right.
Instead of getting the whole X that they have, like, well, I'm going to get this, I'm going to attach it with this and stuff like that to fit your budget. That's awesome. That's awesome. Would you say that TikTok is influenced more of that, or YouTube, or all the above, or?
Well, I think obviously TikTok and YouTube are very different. And, TikTok is just a couple short, either like 20, 15 seconds to just a couple minutes. So that's kind of where, you get a quick overview and you can maybe dive into one topic a little bit. So I would, see videos there and then do more research on the YouTube side of things. That's where I've probably learned most of my knowledge when not working like hands-on with gear would be YouTube. Just, you can learn so much and it's free. It doesn't cost you anything. And even now, like I'm working with a Ross switcher. So I've just been looking up a bunch of Ross videos on their YouTube channel, just learning how to, configure stuff.
Yeah,
So,
Ross
yeah,
University.
yes.
Yeah.
YouTube is a great, free resource for anybody looking to, learn more.
That's awesome. Are you guys on the Ross Carbonite, or
Yeah,
what do you guys?
it's a carbonite. So there's two. There's one dedicated to in the room iMag, and that same feed goes to the 6 other campuses. So they have local worship. It's the same programming. So the central team programs everything. So every campus is singing the same songs and has similar service flows. And then on most Sundays, they'll take the sermon from the broadcast campus, and we're using Resi to send that signal. And then the second video switcher is dedicated just to online, and then it does a couple of other things. So as far as the online service, we will basically stay at the main broadcast campus, and then we'll intercut to our online host team. So if there's a welcome on stage, they're saying something specific to that campus. It doesn't apply to the online community. So that's where the online host in the studio will cut to. And then it's very specific programming just to online.
Yeah, that's cool.
So same thing for.
No,
go ahead.
So are you staying on the iMac cut for the most part, and then just cutting in context shots, or are you doing your separate cut completely?
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about both, and there's advantages and disadvantages to both sides. So currently the way it is most of it is we're basically taking the iMag feed from the first switcher. It's an input to the online switcher, and so we're cutting between the online and then our like studio cameras. But we've talked about, we obviously want to show more wide shots of the room, and that you might not want that on, iMag in the room as much. So we've kind of toyed with the idea, and, I've just started there, so I don't want to like change everything right away. So I don't know, what we'll land on in the future. But that's definitely been discussed.
Okay. When you say studio, like it's a completely separate, like actual like studio, and that's where the online
Right.
hosts. And do you have the online like pastor, or are you cutting back to the main room for message and stuff like that?
Yeah. So basically at the broadcast campus, it has this, really large lobby, and there's kind of this open concept. So you can, if you're in the lobby, attending in-person services, you can see the online studio. So it's kind of cool just to, see what's going on in there. So there's an online ministry director, and she's basically in charge of that on the all of the online programming side of things. And she has a team of volunteers and stuff that she manages. But all of the worship and preaching and stuff is pulled at the main broadcast campus. So we're only cutting to the studio for like welcomes, communion, closing, stuff like that.
Okay, so I might have misunderstood. Is the online bit at another campus?
It's, I mean, it's at the broadcast campus, but it's technically like labeled its own. I don't know if you want to call it campus, but its own section.
Okay.
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
like its own little entity that
Right.
works with broadcast and all that.
Right. Yeah. So they've got the main campus at Henderson and then six other locations. So online is kind of considered its own location, if that
Okay,
makes
gotcha.
sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome. Um, and then do you guys do like separate producers? Obviously, probably, or what's the producer role, um, or show caller role for in the room versus online? Do you guys do separate people?
Yep. So the basically Henderson, the broadcast campus has its own production team. So they have their own camera operators, obviously lighting and CG and audio. And they have their own producer that's calling all transitions and everything in the room. And so they coordinate with the online team. And like I said, we've just started, so we're kind of figuring out how we want to, how it's been done in the past versus what we want to change in the future. But the goal is for online to have, it has its own video director, its own producer, own camera operators, own CG and all of that. So right now, the broadcast campus has its own producer, and kind of the video director for online is communicating and listening into the in-person producer.
Cool. That's awesome. That's really, really cool. And then like you said, eventually you want to get like its own graphics op. So for like, are you going to do like completely separate lyrics too, or is that more just for like different bugs you want to pull in and out and stuff like that?
Yeah, right now it already has its own graphics op. So that's basically like we share CG computers. So like lyrics for worship and stuff, that doesn't have to be run twice. Just we're taking the same computer that's feeding the in the room for iMag. But online has its own dedicated computer graphics. So it's got like two per computers, so we can put up whatever lower third independent of the room. And then in the room, if they wanted to take it too, they have that ability as well.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I mean, I guess they're all hitting the switcher, or the switcher frame, so they can take whatever they want if it's on the bus map. That's
Exactly.
cool.
Yep.
That's awesome. What do you think that now that you're at Compassion, is your TikTok gonna stay active, or like are they gonna be like, hey, let's not do that?
I
But
I honestly I don't know what the future of my TikTok channel will look like. I'm still gonna post. I just was kind of, waiting a couple weeks trying to get settled at Compassion and stuff. So I definitely, continue posting and stuff. So the obviously, like we were talking, the fact that I think a lot of people relate to my TikTok channel of being at a smaller church. Now that I'm at a larger church with larger resources, we'll see how that kind of changes. But it's also exciting too because the smaller churches can also learn from the bigger churches, and then vice versa. So,
absolutely.
kind of interested to see what the future of my TikTok page will
I
look
am too.
like.
I think we all
Yeah.
are. Yeah.
So I
Uh,
I when I left at First Baptist, I made a post, kind of like a teaser of like
yep.
what's to come.
Yeah. Turning off
Um,
the light switches. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I've
Yeah.
kind of, gone silent for two and
Uh-huh.
a half weeks. So I'll inform them in a couple days. Yeah,
It's like the season finale of a TV show. You're
I
like,
know,
when's it
right?
coming back?
Yeah.
No, that's really cool. So what's some things that like you've been at Compassion now for what 3 week 2 weeks, 3 weeks is gonna be your
About to
third
go my third
Sunday.
week. Yep.
What's some stuff that you're excited for the future for your job, for Compassion? Like what are some things that you're like, oh, this would be really fun to do um moving forward?
Yeah, like we kind of touched the surface a little bit about splitting off of iMag and doing your own camera cut. So we're toying with the idea. The main thing that's kind of exciting about Compassion compared to my previous church is just, the resources that it has, the team, so much larger production staff as well as volunteer base. At my previous church, I was not only doing like production, but I was doing like creative content, making sermon bumpers and graphics and stuff. At Compassion, it obviously has its own creative content department and social media team and videographers and all of that. So I have more time to focus just on production. So I think we can execute at a higher level, which I'm really excited about.
That's super cool. That's awesome. Yeah, that's what I have also been in that spot before, like going from, you being the person doing it all. Now, I never thankfully had to do graphics because that not a strong suit. But being at every event, being, this, that, doing all the stuff, and then coming to a bigger church and you're like, wow, so much more time for activities, like this, wow. This
Yeah.
is great. So that's really cool. That's awesome.
Yep. So my job there is kind of split. So I half of it is dedicated to like online service programming and stuff like that. And then the second part of it is like systems projects, upgrading gear, installing, going to the other campuses and servicing gear and stuff. So it's kind of fun, I get to travel to the other campuses and, fix gear. And so it's kind of a split position.
That's awesome. Do you enjoy that aspect? Do you enjoy getting behind a rack or redoing a Terra deck for the fifth time?
Yes, I hate like sitting in an office. So, being able just to like, get out of the office and, you know, tear apart a rack and put it back together and reconfigure stuff that, that's really fun to me.
Yeah, I enjoy it for the most part. I really just like the zip ties. I don't know. Do you guys use
Yes.
zip ties or do you guys use Velcro?
Uh, well, a lot of it is zip ties, but I don't know how I feel about zip ties.
I'm 70/30. I've
Yeah.
grown I've grown to like the Velcro on stuff like drums
Hmm.
and stuff that you could quickly, change out a cable or move a stand or whatever. But then yeah, I love zip ties. They're
Yeah. Zip
fantastic.
ties are nice until you got to move stuff, but
And that's the whole I get it. That's the whole argument to use Velcro. But I'm like,
yeah,
but zip ties just look so much better.
it really does. I would agree.
That's cool. So, Compassion's got 6 campuses, and you are going to be
Seven.
going to seven. Sorry,
You're good.
broadcast, and then 6 campuses. So you're going to be going to like all of them, fixing and just maintaining gear and stuff like that. That's
Exactly. Yep.
awesome. Do you guys have a process for that? Like, what's the process
So they
for
use
that?
yeah, so and it's very similar to how the IT department works. So the other campuses and stuff, they'll put in like a service order, like a help desk ticket, and they use a program called SpiceWorks. I don't know if you're familiar. So basically, say a campus says their projector's not working. Great. So that they submit a ticket, it comes back to the department, and then it gets placed in like a system of like priority. So obviously, a projector not working, if it's in the main worship center, that's pretty high priority. So that gets pushed to the top of the list and is kind of urgent. Whereas, there's like, for instance, another ticket that we're working on is like a confidence monitor. It's glaring. You can see the reflection in a drum shield. So
Oh, shoot. Yeah,
obviously that's not as priority as a, broken projector. So it just gets, put in the system, scheduled, and then assigned to a person. And then that's how it's worked through.
that's cool. What are you guys thinking for that reflection thing? Because like one thing, the confidence monitor could be moved, but probably not going to get moved. So what are you guys
Right.
thinking for that?
Yeah, I was supposed to look at it this past week, but it got rescheduled for something else. So kind of there's two options, I think, and I haven't like visually looked at it yet. Option one would be to relocate it and try to find a better spot for it. The other option is I've seen some like film you can put over the monitor, and it cuts down on the glare, as well as like if you look at it at a side angle, you can't see it. You can only see looking directly on. So
The privacy filter stuff?
right. So that's kind of like the two options I'm looking at right now. Like I said, I haven't like had the time to go look at it in detail yet, but that's kind of like my thoughts on it.
Is the drum, do the drums move? Like, is this like a new issue or is it just an issue that's come through the ticket system?
Yeah, to my understanding, it's just it's not a new issue. They're trying to just figure out a way to fix it.
Okay.
So
Yeah. Sweet. That's awesome. Do you, I mean, is the tickets, is it pretty expansive? Like, is there like a huge list of things or, um, like, is it pretty manageable? Like, yeah, things are operating pretty well. We don't have any big fires that need to be put out.
um I would say there's probably like 15 or 20 open tickets right now. And obviously stuff is constantly changing. Like last week we just installed new free speak belt packs with ClearCom. So that just got marked off the list, which is a pretty big install. So I don't know. I would say it's probably medium. Obviously stuff with like higher priority gets done faster than lower priority with glare and a confidence monitor. So yeah.
Well, and it sounds like Compassion's growing and moving, and so there's going to be things that come up all the time. So you're
Right.
probably not going to be bored too much, which is
Yeah.
which is probably good.
I get to keep my job.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, is I know that I mean, are you a gearhead or do you enjoy the gear part? Like, have you been out to any of like the trade shows, Infocom or NAB and stuff like that? Seen any new stuff lately?
I don't know. I would say I'm kind of like mediocre about that. I enjoy gear. Obviously, that gear is a way to accomplish the goal that you've set. Um, so I am interested in gear and like configuring and messing around to figure out the best way to use it. But I know the team has, I think in previous years, gone to conferences like that. So hopefully we'll go to something like that soon.
No, it's awesome. Yeah, I definitely recommend. Well, and like you were saying, like hopefully your TikTok, you're able to show or you learn how to do different things. Like that's exactly what the trade show is for. It was for me. Like, oh wow, that's really cool. Like I can't buy that, but I might be able to take that concept and do something with it.
Right. Or wait 5 years for it to get cheaper.
Or that, yeah, exactly. So those are really cool to go to. I haven't been in a while, but it's
And
awesome.
just to see like what new gear just, was released and stuff like that. So that's
Yeah,
kind of exciting.
yeah, and like where things are heading, and which and the broadcast industry is definitely heading um, a certain direction, and church may or may not need to follow or want to follow, but it's really cool to see what's possible out there because they're doing stuff for broadcast sports, and we're doing it for broadcast preaching. Still pretty cool. Yeah. Um, cool. Well, Colby, thanks for joining me.
Yeah.
This has been great. Super cool. Love to have you on after you've changed up the online service. Have you on again. That'd be cool to hear like further down the road in your new position. That'd be super, super, super cool. So
Yeah, I would love to. That'd be fun.
that'd be awesome. Thanks so much.
All
Talk to you
right.
later.
See ya.
Oh, hold on. We're not done. We'll cut this out. Let me start that over. I want people to know where to find you. Um, Colby, thanks so much. Really appreciate you being here. Can you tell people where to find you online?
Yeah, you can follow me on TikTok, Instagram. I've started posting a little bit more on YouTube. You can just search Colby Griner, and that's the same username for all those platforms.
Sweet. That's awesome. Thanks, Colby. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks. See ya.